I go by Hank, though I'm not too particular about what people call me. My full name is Henry Sullivan, and I've been married to Lila for 4 years. We've decided to hold off on having kids for now because we really value our freedom. Maybe we'll reconsider in the future, but probably not until we're well into our 30s. Lila and I both grew up in modest households just a few streets apart, but we didn't cross paths until we were 18 at a college recruitment event. Lila shone academically and went on to become an accountant and credit controller. I, on the other hand, struggled with my studies and never graduated, but I've always had a strong work ethic and a knack for business. I started working as a cleaner at 15 in local stores and offices. By the time I turned 18, I was managing 30 employees and had secured contracts with several major companies in town. Lila was on the job hunt, and I needed to expand my team. When she came up to my table at the event, she handed me her resume and said, "I'm not looking for a cleaning job, but perhaps you'd like my phone number?" I called her before she even reached the next table and asked her out for dinner the following night. 4 years later, we were married. That event led Lila to a job in the purchasing department of an engineering firm, starting from the ground up. After 8 years, she advanced to head both the purchasing and credit control departments. This allowed us to enjoy a comfortable life on our dual incomes without kids. Meanwhile, my business thrived, eventually becoming the city's largest office and store cleaning company after acquiring 2 competitors. Cleaners and security guards are often the first to notice unusual things happening in offices, which usually sparks gossip among the staff. About 4 months ago, while I was at my desk, my secretary told me there was a man waiting for me in the reception area. She handed me his business card, which read, "Ethan Cooper, Private Detective." I told her to bring him in. When Ethan arrived, I greeted him with a handshake and asked what brought him to my office. After a bit of small talk, he smiled and said, "Before we get started, could I grab some coffee? I haven't had a sip all day, and I'm dying for a cup." I completely understood. Caffeine is a lifesaver for many business owners. My secretary didn't hesitate and quickly brought out 2 mugs from the office coffee machine, already prepared with milk and sugar. But neither of us reached for them. After some initial chit-chat, I redirected the conversation to the matter at hand. "So, Ethan, how can I be of help?" He got straight to the point. "Just call me Ethan. As you can see from my card, I'm a private investigator working on a case for a client who suspects his wife might be having an affair or is about to. His wife works as an accountant at Stevens Piping, a company that gets supplies from AM Metals. Recently, AM Metals hired a new salesman named Gavin Reed, who has a reputation for pursuing married women. He's been lavishing attention on our client's wife. Flowers, late-night texts, the whole 9 yards. It's been pretty standard until now, but he's recently started pushing for an overnight meetup. We've gathered quite a bit of information, but we need to fill in the last few pieces. I found the whole spying thing amusing, but the name AM Metals rang a bell. Lila's company also sources materials from them, and this Reed guy sounds like someone I'd prefer to keep Lila away from." I glanced up and saw Ethan waiting for my response, so I asked, "I get the gist, but how can I assist?" He grinned and said, "I'm glad you asked. It's quite simple. Reed leaves flowers, notes, and other items on her desk. She reads them and then throws them away. Your staff handles the trash so they could collect any personal items from him and pass them on to us. We'll have our legal team vet them. Gathering personal items doesn't raise legal issues, and we've already cleared it with her employer. Here's the authorization for information collection. By cooperating, they avoid potential legal trouble from violating her contract's fraternization clause. If you're curious why they agreed, here's the CEO's card. Call him to confirm." The CEO's number was already in my phone. Without saying a word to Ethan, I dialed it. He answered on the second ring and without preamble said, "Hank, I understand Ethan Cooper is with you. You're authorized to receive and transmit any non-company related information to him or his team. Our lawyer is drafting a formal letter which will be emailed to you. I have to go. He's waiting in my office. Call me if you need anything else." Then he hung up before I could respond. Clearly they wanted this sorted quickly. Ethan smiled at me, and I nodded, saying, "He confirmed what you said. Give me all the details and we'll start collecting her trash in a separate bag. I'll sort through it here, and you can pick it up every morning at 11. Does that work for you?" Ethan agreed. "Perfect." I then called the designated crew leader, and Ethan instructed us on what to look for: early lunches, late lunches, flowers, notes, and so on. We worked with Ethan for about 6 weeks. At the end of this period, he declared the investigation over. One of my employees noticed the subject didn't return after lunch, so we contacted Ethan, who followed them to a motel. Subsequently, the marriage ended in divorce. Work and family life continued normally, until one day when Lila seemed a bit off. I tried to ask her about it, but she was tight-lipped. About a week later, Nancy, one of my longtime employees and a close friend, came into my office. Nancy, who's about 25 years older than me, has always treated me like a son. As she settled into a chair, I could tell something was wrong. She started, "Do you remember a few months ago when we were involved in that surveillance at the office?" My interest was piqued. How could I forget? It was quite a situation. Why bring it up now? I raised an eyebrow to show my curiosity. "Well," she paused, "since I now work in the same office as your wife, I've noticed that the man we were keeping an eye on is now visiting her office. I saw a large bouquet of flowers today, and she took them with her to lunch. Here's the card that came with the flowers." She handed me the card and I read it. "Dear Lila, thank you for your help in renewing my contract with your company. I'm so grateful. Let's have lunch soon to catch up. With love, Gavin." My heart sank. The card's message suggested their interactions had gone beyond professional and were dangerously close to crossing marital lines. I recalled from Ethan that this guy was persistent and successful with married women, and now my wife was on his radar. I thanked Nancy and asked her to keep a close eye on things, providing me with daily updates. If she found any more notes or messages, I wanted them brought to me immediately. Without delay, I picked up the phone and called Ethan. He answered on the third ring. "Hello, Hank. How can I help?" I quickly relayed Nancy's findings. "A staff member just informed me that the same Mr. Reed is now making advances toward my wife, even taking her out to lunch. I have a card from him indicating his intentions." Ethan took a deep breath. "We're still investigating Mr. Reed. You're actually the third husband dealing with him. The difference is that the other two didn't know his identity at first. They've agreed to share costs. Are you interested in joining them?" I replied immediately. "Absolutely. What's the next step?" Ethan suggested. "We should meet with the other husbands at 2 p.m. Could you come by my office to meet them, fill out the necessary paperwork, and exchange information?" I agreed to arrive at 1:55 p.m. When I arrived at Ethan's office, I met Tom Harris and Alex Carter, along with Ethan and his colleague Sam Johnson, who was handling data collection. Ethan started the meeting saying, "Gentlemen, we're here because you three have a shared problem. Tom and Alex, meet Hank. He wants to join your investigation. If you're okay with it, we'll register him as a client and exchange information." They glanced at me and then at Ethan, nodding in agreement. "Yes, that works for us." The paperwork took about 15 minutes. After that, I used my personal credit card to cover the $5,000. Since Lila wouldn't see a statement for this, Ethan addressed Tom, Alex, and me, saying, "Our common issue is Mr. Gavin Reed. Hank, to bring you up to speed, Tom's wife works with Reed at AM Metals, while Alex's wife works for the school board, which sources metals for tech classes. Reed follows a predictable pattern. He pursues women at work with flowers, messages, lunches, and often tries to lure them to a motel after lunch. He uses the same tactics with married women, pressuring those with children into infidelity and coercing childless women into asking for free passes from their husbands. He seems to enjoy the knowledge that husbands are aware of his manipulations. He arranges weekend getaways only to leave them high and dry. Over the past year, we've tracked at least 5 divorces in our area due to him. Further investigation revealed his previous employment in Dallas, where he was fired after being sued by 7 husbands in a class action lawsuit for alienation of affection. This man is truly despicable." Ethan took a sip of coffee before continuing. "Hank, do you handle cleaning at AM Metals or the school district office?" I shook my head. "No, we don't," I confirmed. Ethan nodded. "That's unfortunate. Still, keep collecting trash from your wife's bin. Who pays her phone bill?" "My business does," I answered. Ethan grinned and asked, "What's her phone number?" I replied, "Samsung." "Great. Please fill out this form to authorize us to access data from her phone," he said, handing me a paper with a QR code. "Scan this code on her phone, and it will direct you to our server. Use the provided username and password to install a program on her device that will send us all calls, messages, emails, and WhatsApp chats." We knew that Reed typically used a mobile phone to avoid any accidental answers from spouses on home lines. The meeting concluded with Tom, Alex, and me exchanging phone numbers and setting up a WhatsApp group that included Ethan and Sam for easier information sharing. When I got home, Lila was already there, looking preoccupied. She clutched her phone tightly and seemed distant during our conversation. She left to feed the dog, taking her phone with her, which was unusual. When I asked her about her day, she said she was tired after an odd day and went to bed at 9:32 p.m., much earlier than usual. I stayed up until our usual bedtime and then searched for her phone. It wasn't in its usual spot, so I went to our bedroom. I spotted a telephone cord near the bed and, upon closer inspection, found it under her pillow. Retrieving it without waking her was impossible, so I went to bed feeling uneasy. Luckily, she got up in the middle of the night, giving me the chance to quickly scan the QR code, enter the details, and return her phone without being noticed. The next morning, she aimlessly wandered around the house before heading off to work. If I hadn't engaged her in conversation, she wouldn't have said anything. Around 11:30 a.m., Sam called from Ethan's office. They had finished analyzing the initial data dump, and Sam began to explain. Lila set up a new email account, seemingly just for him. This is convenient for our investigation. Initially, we didn't know how he was communicating with her, but now we're trying to hack into his email. His messages are very manipulative. He pressured her into talking about how you were her first and only, suggesting she needed new experiences to revive the marriage. She shared intimate details of your life, which he used against you. He hinted at improving your bedroom life, and likely proposed a weekend getaway during their recent lunch. Now he's saying it's just physical, and insisting that if she truly loves you, it won't count as cheating, using guilt to manipulate her. I discussed Lila's behavior from the night before with Sam, noting her preoccupation. She didn't acknowledge my presence last night or this morning, I said. Are they still in contact or planning another lunch? Sam reviewed the messages and relayed the latest one. Just received. Let's meet for lunch at the beach club tomorrow and plan. Lou loves you, and if you tell him, it won't be considered cheating, and he can't deny you a free pass. Lila's response was simply, okay. After wrapping up my conversation with Sam, I leaned back, contemplating my next steps. Talking to Lila directly wouldn't suffice. Reed might persist, even arranging a motel visit. I had to put an end to this, either by stopping Reed or ending my marriage. I called Ethan, exchanging pleasantries before getting straight to the point. It seems he's making a direct move on Lila and flaunting it in my face. Even if I intervene, he'll find another tactic, maybe even setting up a motel visit. I need a plan to stop this. I'm thinking of filing for divorce, but I might need a backup plan too. I'm not sure what it should be yet. What do you think? After a brief pause, Ethan replied, having a backup plan is smart, but if it fails, he won't give up. I know his type. His ego won't let her go easily. So if forgiveness isn't an option, divorce might be inevitable. I'll prepare a packet of documents for your attorney, or I can recommend mine. I have my own lawyer, thanks, I confirmed. Ethan drafted a business agreement protected by a trust in case of divorce. I contacted my lawyer and scheduled a meeting for the next morning at 9:30. When I arrived at his office, he scrutinized me. Damn it, who changed it? I chuckled. He knew me too well. After accepting the coffee his secretary offered, I started, Lila is on the verge of betraying me. A salesman at her workplace has set his sights on her. She's taken the bait, and now I see no other option but to devise a backup plan to stop everything. But if she cheats, plan A goes out the window. We spent the next hour exploring possible actions. I favored a straightforward divorce. With the business protected by the agreement, it would be divided evenly. And there were no children, so no child support. The house would be sold. I had no intention of suing Reed, his employer, or her employer, too costly with slim chances of success. We sealed our agreement with a handshake. After settling the fee, I left. He mentioned finalizing all documents and storing them for future reference. Lila's behavior fluctuated throughout the week. One evening she was affectionate, while the next she barely acknowledged me. On Friday afternoon, Nancy called to say Lila had received a large bouquet of flowers, along with a postcard. That confirmed it for me. I noticed Ethan's post in the WhatsApp group, inviting her to dinner at the Holiday Inn. We knew his intentions, but the situation remained unresolved. I urgently encouraged Tom to join me, hoping he would achieve his goal soon. I wished for a similar resolution in my own situation. I was so preoccupied that I kept dropping things. I updated the group with news about the flowers and the card. Sam's reply came swiftly. I'll check her email now. Nothing yet. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a call from Sam, who directed me to check my WhatsApp. There, I found a document he had sent. A hotel reservation confirmation for a lakeside spot, roughly 30 miles from the city. The reservation was for a double room for the upcoming Friday and Saturday, under the names Reed and Lila. I relayed the grim discovery to Sam. He sighed heavily before adding, "Yes, but the email's even more revealing." He proceeded to describe the email as a step-by-step guide written by Lila. It detailed exactly how she was supposed to manage this affair. Sam promised to forward the email to me. When the email arrived, it was worse than I'd imagined. The subject line read, "Weekend," and it detailed the correspondence between Lila and Reed. It started about 2 weeks ago when Reed sent Lila a link to the same hotel he eventually booked. His messages were filled with promises of indulgence and fun, questioning her thoughts and subtly criticizing my supposed failures as a husband. The final email included the reservation details and a carefully crafted script. It advised Lila on how to convince me that their meeting would be harmless and purely physical. Reed's manipulation was clear. He suggested she prepare a special dinner for me, be more affectionate, and frame the affair as something that would actually improve our relationship. He left the decision to her, making it clear that if she didn't act, it was her choice. I needed to plan my next move carefully. The weekend was an exhausting blur of activity. Though I couldn't share my concerns, Lila was unusually attentive. We were intimate multiple times over the weekend, Friday night, Saturday morning and evening, and Sunday afternoon. Despite her actions, I couldn't shake the growing unease. On Monday, at 3 p.m., Ethan called with more troubling news. Lila had messaged Reed with a proposal for Thursday night. If Reed accepted, she would follow through. Ethan added, "Reed's confident that even if she feels guilty, it'll be easier to get forgiveness than permission." I thanked Ethan and asked him to prepare a folder with all the relevant documents. He confirmed he had a photo of Lila and Reed, not in a passionate embrace, but clearly together. I instructed him to make that photo the cover page and send the entire packet to my attorney. Ethan assured me he would handle it. Next, I contacted my lawyer and warned him about the folder's imminent arrival. We planned to present it at the hotel on Saturday morning, over breakfast. As I told my lawyer, nothing makes the heart race quite like preparing for a divorce. Monday night, Lila wanted to be close, but I declined, citing urgent work. I stayed in the office until 2 a.m., and when I finally went to bed, she was already asleep. I slept soundly, despite the stress, and woke up early to head to work. Just as she was about to reach out to me, a courier arrived with the folder. I reviewed it in my office, and it confirmed my worst fears. Lila's actions were shockingly manipulative. Ethan had detailed several cases of marriages he had helped unravel over the past 18 months. A note from Tom recounted a painful incident at the Holiday Inn involving his wife, Reed, and himself. Tom's wife had fled in tears, and Tom had sought Ethan's help to escort him home. The couple had begun counseling in a desperate attempt to save their marriage, especially given their 3 young children. Tom's wife had resigned, leaving Reed without a job, but the situation was still dire. As I absorbed the contents of the folder, my secretary entered, her gaze fixed. Overwhelmed, I shared the entire situation with her. She listened intently, and then asked, "What's your plan?" For the first time, I felt a genuine sense of comfort and support from her, recognizing her as more than just a secretary. I instructed her, "Prepare for the divorce. If Lila leaves with Reed on Friday, she'll file for divorce at the hotel on Saturday. No second chances. I've been trying to think of a backup plan, but I'm struggling to come up with anything." Meg, my secretary, grinned mischievously and said, "You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Why not have your own weekend with someone special?" I couldn't help but smile and asked, "And who might that be?" Meg replied with a playful glint in her eye, "Well, with me, of course. Your loyal secretary is here to help you unwind. It's just for fun, no strings attached." I decided to use the letter as leverage. The plan was straightforward but effective. Make Lila confront her own betrayal. On Tuesday night, I was intimate with Lila, but my emotions were distant and detached, a challenging feat. By Wednesday morning, Neither of us was inclined for a quick encounter. Although tension slightly eased by Wednesday evening, they were still palpable. Thursday morning, as I was leaving the house, Lila woke up, yelling about dinner plans. I deliberately ignored her. Around noon, Ethan called to update me. Lila had messaged Reed, bragging about cooking a lavish dinner and promising to update him afterward. I decided to act first. I went to the store and bought chicken, potatoes, vegetables, and a bottle of her favorite white wine. By 2:30 p.m., I was back home, and within 2 hours, everything was in the oven. As I was placing the potatoes to bake, Lila arrived with shopping bags, looking puzzled. "What's going on?" she asked. I gave her a broad smile. "I'm preparing a special dinner for my dear wife. I wanted to make it nice before we have a conversation." Her face showed surprise. "I was planning to cook dinner too, but after we eat, I have something important to discuss. So it looks like it's going to be a long night." "Of course," I replied, maintaining my smile. I had already made a significant contribution to her plans. Dinner was tense. I kept the conversation flowing, deflecting any attempts to turn the focus on me. I urged her to enjoy the meal before sharing my own news. Afterward, I suggested, "Bring your wine to the kitchen. We can talk there." Lila followed me into the kitchen, where I had previously placed a folder with a letter outlining her excuses, hidden under a couple of magazines. I removed the magazines, revealing the document. "Lila, I want you to know how much I cherish you and would never intentionally hurt you," I began. "We married young, and my inexperience showed. Lately, my new secretary, Miss Atwood, or Meg, as she prefers, has been sharing some fascinating stories with me. I need to clear my mind before we continue our lives together. So, I've planned a hotel stay with her this weekend. It will be purely physical, a chance for me to unwind and maybe pick up some new techniques to try with you later. This doesn't change my love for you or our marriage. I'm telling you now to avoid any misunderstanding." Lila's face flushed with anger. "Over my dead body. I want this woman gone by Monday morning or we're done." Her reaction was almost gratifying. I laughed, finding her expression amusing. Then it hit her. I had anticipated every response she had planned. I closed the folder and handed it to her, revealing a photo of her kissing Reed on the cover. Her face went pale as she whispered, "You knew and played me." I smiled. "Yes, I did. Your reaction is exactly what I would have felt if the roles were reversed. Unlike you, I didn't book a hotel for us. Unlike you, Meg and I never shared intimate lunches, kisses, or conversations about love. My story was purely fictional. Yours, however, is very real." As she flipped through the folder, her anger grew. Dates, times, photographs, emails, and call transcripts. Everything was laid bare. She was livid. "You followed me. You invaded my privacy. How could you?" I remained calm. "That's all there is to it. You need to decide what to do now. I love you, but there are boundaries. You've gotten involved with someone else, planned to make it physical, and humiliated me in the process. And yet, you're angry at me for trying to stop it. I thought we could work through this, but maybe I was wrong." "What do you mean by humiliating me and wrecking our marriage? I never intended anything like that. It was separate from our marriage," she countered, quoting the infidelity playbook. I echoed her words and pointed out, "You responded to me as if I had said the same thing. Why is it acceptable for you to cheat, but not for me?" She took a deep breath, preparing to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. "There's no such thing as a free pass. If you go with Reed, it's still cheating, even if you tell me beforehand. It won't change the situation." She looked away and murmured, "I can't process this right now. I need to be alone." With that, she hurried upstairs, taking the folder with her. I heard the bedroom door slam and lock. I tidied up the kitchen and sat down at the table. Ethan had given me a tablet to monitor Lila's phone activity. I logged in and found her messages with Reed. Her initial letter was particularly intriguing. Lila voiced concerns about being followed and having her messages intercepted. When she returned home, she found Reed had prepared dinner and seemed to know exactly what she was thinking, which only fueled her anger. Later, Reed showed me a folder containing all the details, including the reservation. He was uncertain about how to proceed, but suggested informing Lila that everything was booked and they had to go through with it. His desperation was evident. Attempting to follow his advice, I faced resistance from Lila, who argued that revealing the details would embarrass him and jeopardize our marriage. She insisted that even asking for permission would be considered cheating. Torn and conflicted, I couldn't proceed with Reed's plan. Despite the potential enjoyment of the weekend, I couldn't risk my future with Lila. Seeing Reed's disappointment, it became clear that his efforts and resources had been in vain, and he decided to take a significant risk. Reed asked Lila if she thought her husband would divorce her. Lila replied negatively, doubting that I would find another woman like her. He suggested she pack her bag and bring it to work to gauge my reaction. If that didn't work, they would proceed with their weekend plan and seek forgiveness on Sunday. Despite recognizing the absurdity of the suggestion, Lila fell for it. She concluded that if it seemed like I might leave her, she wouldn't go through with the plan. She intended to meet Reed the next day. As she began to think more rationally, Reed knew how to reassure her. I set aside the tablet and turned on the TV, though my mind was consumed by the situation. The decision was made to file for divorce on Saturday, though there was contemplation about postponing it. However, once initiated, there would be no turning back. I decided to proceed with the filing the next day, intending to show seriousness in a different manner. I called my lawyer and explained everything in detail. Hey, I dropped the bomb on her and Reed told her I'd forgive her. She's planning to pack her bag to see how I'll react. I don't want to file for divorce until they've slept together. Is there a way to show her how serious this is? My lawyer was sharp. We could prepare a preliminary claim letter. We'd assert that you're aware of her plans for an affair over the weekend and that if she goes through with it, divorce proceedings will be initiated on Saturday morning at the hotel. I suggested expanding the letter and delivering it to her office, preferably with Reed present. What do you think? It'll serve as clear proof that I mean business. She mentioned Reed would pick her up for lunch. I propose we hand her the letter around 11 o'clock, regardless of his presence. Her employer would understand the situation. He's traditional and won't approve of her actions. But what would really upset him is if a process server showed up and caused a scene. About an hour later, my lawyer sent a draft of the letter, perfectly suited to the circumstances. It detailed all the pertinent information and made it clear that she would be served. On Saturday morning, I confirmed my approval of the plan. I checked the tablet, but there were no new messages from Lila or Reed. I decided to turn in for the night. When I tried to open the bedroom door, I found it unlocked. Inside, Lila was lying in bed, seemingly expecting a romantic encounter. Her packed bag was positioned against the wall on her side of the bed, catching my eye. I noted her decision and remarked, "So, you've chosen a quick rendezvous with Reed over our marriage." Without waiting for a response, I left the room and headed to the guest room. Despite her pleas as I walked away, I remained silent. Lying fully clothed on the guest bed, I realized the letters were not my own work, but rather someone else's. Nonetheless, seeing her bag packed for another man stirred deep emotions. It felt like a profound betrayal. I was overwhelmed with grief, and tears streamed down my face throughout the night. The next morning, I heard Lila descending the stairs. I retreated to our bedroom to shower and change, only to find my bag missing. I wondered if she had taken it downstairs and unpacked it. After showering, I caught the aroma of coffee and bacon, indicating my bag was indeed downstairs. Entering the kitchen, I met her gaze, noting her nervous demeanor. My initial reaction was to confront her directly. I suppose this lavish spread is an attempt to show the kind of wife you'll be if you choose to sleep with another man. But it won't sway me. If you go through with this, it's the end for us. The divorce papers will be served to you tomorrow morning at breakfast. Once they're served, there's no turning back. If you return home tonight, we'll start counseling to rebuild trust and prevent this from happening again. If you leave with him, don't even think about coming back. You won't be welcome here. As I turned to leave, Lila implored, "Please stay for breakfast." "We need to talk," Lila said as I turned to face her. "We've already had that conversation," I responded firmly. "Your packed bag is more about trying to convince me than about genuine discussion. I won't be having breakfast here. If you choose this path, you'll need to handle things on your own. I assume your bag's already in your car?" She turned away, and her silence confirmed my suspicions. Leaving the house in silence, at least she seemed to grasp the seriousness of the situation. At the office, Megan looked at me with concern. "You look awful." I forced a smile. "And you're as stunning as ever." Before she could ask more, I said, "I'm not sure how it went. When I told Lila about Plan B, she lost her temper. She threatened to fire you and said, only over my dead body. She then decided to take matters into her own hands. I packed my weekend bag this morning. At 11, she'll get a letter from me with a clear directive. Let's see if that shakes her up. Megan brewed coffee while I spoke. As she handed me a cup, she said, I hope she sees sense. She can't honestly believe her actions are acceptable while expecting you to tolerate them. I gave a sad smile and took a seat at the table. The rest of the day was unremarkable. Shortly after 11, my phone rang. It was Lila, her voice choked with tears. Are you serious? Are you really going through with the divorce? She had clearly misjudged my resolve. If you break our agreement, it's a breach of trust, I said. We both know that. If I were to cheat, you'd leave me, right? Her reply was barely audible, but a resigned, yes. She coughed and asked, will you come home to talk? I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, ending the call. I got home first and started brewing coffee. The scent of the bacon she had made lingered, so I opened the kitchen window before sitting down to eat. Lila arrived 10 minutes later. I was pouring coffee when she walked in, holding the envelope from the lawyer and her weekend bag. She dropped her bag by the door and hesitated, unsure whether to approach me. I carried the coffee to the table and gestured for her to join me. So, are you still planning to go to the hotel? How can you ask that after sending this? She exclaimed. Of course I'm not going. I love you. I want to stay with you. I know you wouldn't tolerate it. Everything is canceled. Now, do we work on our marriage or will I still be served papers? She sat down, lowering her chin. I reached across the table and lifted her chin to meet my eyes. You'll only be served if you actually go to the hotel. No hotel, no papers. However, our marriage is in serious trouble. Here's what needs to happen. First, you'll call Reed in front of me and tell him it's over. Then, you'll disable and delete your personal email so he can't contact you anymore. After that, you'll inform your boss about Reed's behavior and request he be banned from the office. Finally, we'll start counseling to understand why you were tempted, why you thought this was acceptable, and how we can rebuild trust. Just as I finished, her phone rang. It was Reed. She put it on speaker. Where are you, Lila? I'm waiting at the reception and can't wait any longer. Lila took a deep breath. Gavin, I'm home with Hank. What you did made me realize if I go with you, I'm destroying my marriage. I'm sorry, but you're not worth it. I'm not coming. Reed's response was explosive. You're a fool. Do you know how much time and money I invested in you? And now you're walking away? When the weakling acts like a scorned child, you're nothing but a joke. Forget you. He hung up, leaving Lila to see him for who he really was, a manipulative fraud. Disabling and deleting the email account was tougher than expected, but was done within an hour. By the time we finished, Lila's boss and HR manager, Leonard Brown, arrived at our door. Brown addressed Lila. Lila, we know about today's events. We're deeply disappointed, but we're giving you a chance to keep your job. Please explain what happened. Lila dabbed her eyes with a tissue before speaking. A few months ago, our account was assigned to a new sales agent, Gavin Reed. He began flirting with me, complimenting my looks and eventually belittling my husband. I fell for it and started dressing provocatively. He sent gifts and invited me out. I foolishly accepted, and during dinner he made personal and degrading comments about my husband. He proposed a weekend trip, but Hank's letter about divorce snapped me out of it. I told Gavin I wouldn't go, and Hank and I are trying to save our marriage. I'm grateful you're here to help me report this. Brown glanced at the CEO, who nodded before addressing Lila. Lila, we appreciate your honesty. It was a major mistake, but you're lucky to keep your job. Due to issues with AM Metals products, we're closing their account, and Reed will be removed from the office. No further action will be taken against you. However, if anything like this happens again, you'll be terminated. Do you understand? Lila nodded quietly. Yes, they left after offering their support. Lila and I had lunch and then searched for a marriage consultant. Finding one was straightforward, and we scheduled an appointment for the following day, Saturday. We sat together, exchanging glances. After a moment, I took Lila's hand and led her to bed. We made love, and later I fell asleep with my head resting on her chest. I woke up around 5 a.m. and we shared another intimate moment, possibly the first genuine connection since her involvement with Reed. The consultations were beneficial. Lila realized Reed had exploited her fear of a mundane life, and she had inadvertently given him the means to manipulate her. I understood that for Reed, it had all been a game, and I gained a deeper appreciation for our life together. We didn't need external guidance. The consultations continued for 3 months. 4 years later, we're still happily together, and Lila is expecting our first child. As for Mr. Reed, he had a nasty fall at the shopping center while descending the stairs to the parking lot. The circumstances remain unclear, but several husbands with grievances against him were present. Dressed in black and baseball caps, we were among the crowd. Despite the police's attempts to separate us, we kept our silence. I'm convinced one of us was responsible.